and little fellows and little ladies. Are you excited to hear the story about Hajj and Eid? Why do we celebrate? I can see a twinkle in your eyes with excitement, and even I'm very excited to share this story with you. You're my little friends. I look so forward to meeting you. And how is your Eid going? What did you do? I'm sure you visited people, you sacrificed an animal and shared the meat and the goodies and the Eid with the less fortunate ones, people who are poor, children who are poor or orphans and cannot afford good and expensive things in life. That's what God wants us to do, and that's what pleases Him the most. So let's get started with the story of, Prophet Ibrahim. Abraham in English and Ibrahim in Urdu. So Prophet Ibrahim was born more than 4,000 years ago in Babylon. You can ask your mums to look up the map and show you. And he was born with a special mind and heart. He was a pure spirit. He was a good child, and he would not take things for granted. As he was growing as a toddler, he would play with statues and the parts and the toys. His father, whose name was Azar, who used to make them, and he used to make them, we'll tell you when and for what. So these Prophet Ibrahim was, even as a child, as he was maybe 5 or 6, he would wonder, why would people bow and prostrate like we do in namaz, our prayers? We bow down and pray, but they would pray and bow down in front of sculptures, statues made by hands. And his father was a very special sculpturist and artist who used to make them. So he would wonder, why do they worship to them? Why do they worship them? Why would they do that? How can you worship something that has been made out of your own hands, and then it cannot speak, it cannot hear, and they cannot see? So he would wonder, and then he would laugh at them. How can they give them favors when they can't even move? So he used to laugh at them, but he would play with the toys. But his father told him not to misbehave with the statues because they were gods. So he was a good child, he was obedient, he did as he was told. But he could not stop thinking because he had a very wise head on his shoulders. Then when he was 7, he asked his father again, why do they worship these statues who cannot talk, speak, move, and you made them? But his father got angry. He says, never make this kind of conversation in my house. We revere, we respect these gods. How dare you speak like that? So he quietened down, but he did not stop questioning and laughing at those people secretly. Then as he grew, he used to wonder, who is Allah, who is God? And then one day when he was 16, he walked away towards the mountains, just like Prophet Muhammad. He went up the hills, and there he found a cave, and he sat there and he wondered. And then he saw the moon. It was beautiful, lighting up the world, and he thought that was a god. But then it vanished. Then came the sun. Sun was gorgeous, golden, giving light and warmth and comfort to everyone. He thought, he is the creator, he is the God. But then when night came, he could not see the sun. And same was with the stars. So like other people, first he thought, oh my God, they are gods. But he said, what vanishes, what disappears, cannot be our God, our Creator. These things have been created by God. So he realized that, and he thought and thought. And then he heard a voice that told him, it was one of the angels of God speaking to him, that you have been appointed a prophet from God to spread his name and his message. Your mission will be to call people towards Allah, towards God. He was really thrilled and excited. He ran to his father. But when his father heard that he is proclaiming to be a prophet, he got very angry. He says, how can you stop us from worshipping what our grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers worshipped, our ancestors? We can't go away from these gods. No, you are wrong, and if you don't want to worship them, you better leave my home. So Asa, his father, was very angry and upset. So he started wandering around, because he knew his mission was to convey the message of God, that there is only one God. So he went around and spoke to people in the markets everywhere, but nobody would listen to him. Then he thought of a plan. He knew there was a celebration coming when the whole town would be at the riverside. So that night he picked up an axe and went to the temple, broke down all these statues except one, the biggest one, and then quietly slipped away. The next morning, when these people came to the temple to offer their offerings and sacrifices, they were shocked. Their gods were all broken into pieces. They were very angry and mad and furious. They said, who has done that? And then they remembered there was a boy who was talking against them and was inviting them towards Allah, the one God. They said, it must be him. They asked him. He said, no, it's not me. It's your God. The statue who did this. They said, he can't move. How could he do it? He said, then he started laughing. Then how can you worship him when he can't move, listen to you, or talk to you, or even look at you? He can't see you, then how can he be your God? But they were so angry that they took him to King Namrud. Now the king, Namrud, also was very upset. So with the king's counseling and the elderly people, they decided that he should be punished and burnt in a huge fire, like you have bonfire in your schools or festivities. But this was like 100 times bigger. Oh my God. But Prophet Abraham, at young age, he didn't stop preaching. Excuse me. And then what? Okay, now this boy in Babylon was thrown into such huge fire, and everybody was terrified. And what did they see? They saw something flying down from heaven and sitting next to Prophet Abraham, and both of them are talking, sitting within the fire. Oh my God. But after hours of burning, when the fire turned out, they realized, they saw Prophet Abraham walking out just as he was, because God had turned the fire cold for him. He felt as if he was sitting in a rose garden. And when he walked out, his clothes were as clean as before. There was no soot, no ashes. His clothes, his skin was not burnt. And he was healthy, fine. And they were shocked. They said, it's a miracle, it's a miracle. So some people did start following his God, one God, our Allah. But mostly they were very, very frustrated and kind of confused. So they decided to turn him out of the town. So he, with Hazrat Sarah, one lady, and Hazrat Lut, another gentleman, who believed in him, had faith in him and one God, left Babylon, and they traveled through Syria and Palestine, through the desert on the camel. Dry, long, tedious journey, but they took it with courage because they believed in Allah and they knew that God will protect them if they abide by Him, if they are obedient to Him, and they could do the right things. So they reached Egypt. In Egypt, Hazrat Lut went to where the Red Sea was, and he camped there and he started preaching there. And he also became prophet known as Hazrat Lut alayhi salam. Wow. And then Hazrat Ibrahim married Hazrat Sarah, and they lived happily, but they had to work very hard. They grew quite old, but they did not have a child, and Prophet Ibrahim wanted a child who could preach like him and assist him and give the message of God to people when he was gone. He was really sad, but then one of the evil kings, when he could not compete with Hazrat Sarah, when he saw the miracle, he gave Hazrat Hajra to him to Hazrat Sarah as a slave. But they kept her as a friend, as a maid, and they lived together. And then Hazrat Sarah asked Prophet Ibrahim to marry Hazrat Hajra, and so maybe they could have a son, and they did. And he was named Hazrat Ismail, because God had told him to do so. So Prophet Ibrahim was so happy. So was Hazrat Sarah and Hazrat Hajra to have Hazrat Ismail. But then one night Prophet Ibrahim had a vision, and the vision was that he was to take Hazrat Hajra and his only precious son away to the deserts in Makkah. And so he woke up and he told Hazrat Hajra that we have to take Hazrat Ismail, the little one, with us and go wherever our God tells me to leave you, to take you. So they traveled through hardships, dry lands and desert and sand, and then they reached Al-Marwa. That was a small hill, and that's where they camped. And now he turned back, Hazrat Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim turned back. And hello Sarosh, good to see you. Thank you for joining in. He turned back. Hazrat Hajra was worried. She said, "Are you going to leave us here?" He said, "Yes." So she said, "This is another commandment from God." He said, "Yes." So she knew that God will look after them because they were obeying His commandment. And Hazrat Ibrahim, with a heavy heart, left his son and his wife back on Al-Marwa in Makkah and left and went back to Egypt. Now, here Hazrat Hajra and Ismail just had food and water and dates for 2 days or 3 days. They were finished. Now, little boy, Hazrat Ismail was very thirsty and hungry, and he was asking his mother for milk and food or water. Hazrat Hajra was really worried and anxious, so she started running. She went up Al-Marwa and climbed it to see if she could see any nomad passing by, but there was no one. And then she came running down and climbed up As-Safa. That was another hill. Now you've heard these names. This is where we run between these two hills, following the sunnah of Hazrat Hajra during Hajj. Right? And she ran 7 times, so maybe she could see some traveler, passerby or a nomad and ask for water or help. But she could not see anyone. She was so sad, but she had full faith in Allah. And she came and held Ismail in her lap and she was praying. And then what happened was, they were travelers coming from Jerusalem, that kind of a tribe, and they were traveling and they saw crows and birds circling and flying certain place near Al-Marwa. They were surprised because they knew there was no water outlet, no pond, no lake, no river there. So how could the birds be flying there? But they said there has to be something alive and some water source. So they went towards Al-Marwa, and what did they see? While this was happening, while Hazrat Hajra was praying, she heard some sound, and when she turned around, what she saw? Hazrat Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, had descended and was digging in the sand, and then water gushed out. A spring of natural water came out. She went running, drank some water, and kind of surrounded with stones so the water would not run wild and get wasted. And then she went running to Hazrat Ismail and fed him with water and milk, and he was nourished. She was so happy. And then when these people reached this place, they saw the spring. And guess what spring it was, which was dug by Hazrat Jibreel for Hazrat Ismail and Hazrat Hajra. Its name is Zamzam, and it has been there for more than 4,000 years ago, kids. Can you imagine? And it still provides fresh, pure water. It is very sacred because it belongs to the homeland of Allah, of our God. Yes, it's very special. And it's still, that spring is still there, and we all bring water from there. And then these people requested Hazrat Hajra, they were so happy to see the spring. If they could have some water, she said, of course, you can. And then they decided to camp down there because there was a source of water and they could live there. And they started living, and they called the rest of the tribe, the clan, the families. So it became so well inhabited, crowded, lively town of Makkah, right? And that's how this town started. Now, Hazrat Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham, was very sad. He was missing his son very much. After years and years of waiting and preaching, and Hazrat Sarah had been doing whatever God had commanded them to do. So one day Prophet Abraham told Hazrat Sarah that I have to go and meet my son. She said, of course you should go and see Ismail. And so he took the journey and came all the way. Now this is when Hazrat Ismail has grown up, and back of the heart he knew his father will come to see him, meet him. And here he was known as a boy with virtues, good qualities, an honest young man, truthful. Everybody loved him in the town, and they trusted him and respected him. And now Hazrat Ibrahim came along, and when he found out that Hazrat Hajra sadly had passed away, he was so saddened. But then he saw Prophet Ismail, his son, and they were so happy to see each other. They hugged each other and they thanked God and they prayed together. They were so happy to see each other. Now Hazrat Ibrahim, Prophet Ibrahim, spent days here with his son. And then one day he had a dream. What dream it was? It kind of baffled him and surprised him. He got up in the middle of the night and he realized it was just a dream. So he said, it's a dream, I should forget about it. But again, the second night, again he had the same dream with the same words and message. He couldn't believe it, that he was being asked In his dream, he had heard, he had dreamt that he was being asked by God to sacrifice his most precious person, and that was Hazrat Ismail, in the altar of Allah, to please Allah. But when he had the same dream the third night over, he was really convinced that this is the commandment of God. And he was very obedient. He was a prophet. He was a Messiah. He had to do whatever God wanted him to do, because he wanted to please Allah. He wanted Allah to be happy with him, no matter what. Whatever he had to offer, whatever he had to give up, or whatever he had to sacrifice. Now, he went to his son, Hazrat Ismail, and told him, I've been having this dream for 3 nights together in a row, one night after another. I have been asked to sacrifice you in the way of Allah. Hazrat Ismail did not feel frightened. He was very courageous. His faith was as strong. He said, Baba, whatever God wants you to do, you go ahead. I'm at your service. I'm at the service of God. I don't mind. You go ahead with your sacrifice. So they decided to go to Mount Arafat. And so the father and the son, with knife and ropes and some piece of cloth to blindfold, they went up. Now when they reached there, Hazrat Ismail asked his father to tie up his hands and feet, so he would not struggle out of fear and run away. And then he asked his father to blindfold himself, like we play that game, so he would not be able to see his son suffering, being butchered, right? And then that's what Hazrat Ibrahim did. He was blindfolded, and he placed his son with tied hands and feet on top of Mount Arafat, and put the knife on the neck of Hazrat Ismail and prayed to God, this is to please you, Allah, as you commanded me to do so. And once he thought he had done it, and suddenly he heard some whispers and some wind blowing, and he opened his eyes, and what he saw was his son Hazrat Ismail was standing right next to him with a smile. And there was a big ram, big goat, instead of Hazrat Ismail, that had been slaughtered, that had been butchered. Oh my God. And he received the message through Angel Gabriel that his sacrifice had been accepted. God was very pleased with Prophet Ibrahim and Ismail, and he asked them, what did he want? And Hazrat Ibrahim said, all I want is to please Allah, like he said in the middle of the fire, and I want that from my next generation, children after children, there would be more prophets, good, pious, pure men who would preach Allah's message and call people to Allah. And his prayer was accepted, because Prophet Muhammad is the great grandchild of Hazrat Ibrahim. Do you understand that? Yes. So his prayer was answered, and God was so pleased with the faith and attitude and fortitude and courage, and his being so stoic and strong in faith that he did not falter, he did not even think twice, he just did as God had commanded him. So in order to commemorate, to remember the great act of Prophet Ibrahim and Prophet Ismail, we celebrate this day and we sacrifice on Eid al-Azha, on Eid al-Adha, we sacrifice animals, just like imitating the act of Hazrat Ismail and Hazrat Ismail. But the purpose behind this is to share this bounty, this food, luxuries and goodies and Eidies with poor people who are less fortunate, with orphans, with poor people who are homeless, who can't even buy food, who can't even buy clothes or shoes. I hope you're all doing that. It's not to show off and brag and boast about, oh, we did this. No, it has to be quiet. Sacrifice in the name of Allah. Look at our Prophet, what he did. He gave his son. Little did he know that this miracle will happen. And then in another message from God, Hazrat Ibrahim, the Prophet, he received this message that since they have been calling people towards Allah. Now after seeing this miracle and seeing Hazrat Ismail totally alive and untouched, so many people started believing in one God, in Hazrat Ibrahim's God and in Hazrat Ismail's God, and they started obeying them and listening to them, and they all prayed with Hazrat Ibrahim. But now they needed a place to pray. So God sent a message again to Prophet Ibrahim with his, who? Yes, you guessed it right. Prophet Angel Jibreel. Yes. And Angel Gabriel brought this message that why don't you make a place for worship which will be the house of God on earth, and that is our Khana Kaaba. You've seen it, the beautiful, perfect, proportionate, black robed square. That's where and what was constructed more than 4,000 years back by the commandment of God, by the orders of Allah through Angel Gabriel. They built, Hazrat Ismail and Hazrat Ibrahim, they both built the walls of Khana Kaaba for the first time. So they would have a place to worship, to offer prayers. And they went on and they built the walls. As the walls got higher and higher, what happened was, now Hazrat Ibrahim needed to reach up the walls. So Hazrat Ismail brought a big black stone for him to stand on so he could climb up. And so they were able to reach the top of the walls and make a roof out of these stones and bricks. And it was square shaped, just like this. And then, now this big mount of a rock is called Maqam Ibrahim, place of Abraham, where he stood and constructed the Khana Kaaba. And this is the place where he stood and called people towards Khana Kaaba for prayers. And then he was taught by Gabriel, Angel Gabriel, the rituals and the method of how to go around the Khana Kaaba and do tawaf, and how the Hajj was to be performed, and how the prayers during the Hajj be performed. Is that right? And then while they were constructing the Khana Kaaba, there was one corner which was left without a stone. Now Hazrat Ismail was really tired, but Hazrat Ibrahim told him to get one stone so they could finish it before they would call people for the prayer and show them the house of God, the Khana Kaaba. Well, then he said, okay, I'm tired, but I'll go and see what I can do. But while he was gone, Hazrat Ibrahim received a white, beautiful stone from Angel Gabriel again, and he told him this special stone was brought by Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, Prophet Adam, to earth when he came from paradise. So this stone is from paradise. And then when Hazrat Ismail came, he was surprised. But then his father told him who had brought this, it was so sacred and precious. Then they both put it in that gap in the corner of Khana Kaaba, and that came to be known as Hajre Aswad. But this is a special stone from paradise, from heaven, from Jannah. Do you all understand that? Well, I hope you'll remember this story. So this is why we perform Hajj in this first month of Zil Hajj. According to Islamic calendar, this is the first month of the year, Zil Hajj. And on 10th, we have Eid, and on 9th, we finish the rituals of Hajj. And so, as Hazrat Ibrahim constructed the house of Kaaba, the house of God, and he was the first one to perform prayers and Hajj, and then he was the one who sacrificed his son to please God. So that's why these things are held together exactly on the same dates as they were performed then, 4,000 years ago. So why do we celebrate? Why do we celebrate Eid al-Adha? Yes, you're absolutely right. Because Hazrat Ibrahim had 3 dreams and he was told to sacrifice his most precious person in his life, and that was Hazrat Ismail. And Hazrat Ismail was willing to do, he was not scared. He also wanted to please Allah Ta'ala, and that's what they did. So we pay tribute, we pay respect, and we commemorate and remember that day with honor and sacrifice, and then sharing our bounties with poorer people. Okay? Have you understood? And now you know why we perform Hajj and we go round. So these rituals and these methods of prayers were taught and told and commanded by Allah to Hazrat Ibrahim. So I hope you understood the story. If you still have any questions, please send me the messages. I would love to read them. I love your messages. I love your ideas. I hope I was able to make you understand and feel the significance and importance and preciousness of this day. Eid Mubarak to all of you, and enjoy your Eid and be good and stay happy and safe. Khuda Hafiz. Bye bye.